this room to grow like ooh la la la, ooh la. I know why you like it.
Right.
'Cause when you get in trouble.
Well, welcome back to the J&D podcast. This is episode 2, and we're going to be talking about what it means to truly be a Stoic. We have a guest here, Mr. Carrol. He was our philosophy professor, and he's a professor here at Hanover College. And
Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, Don. Yeah.
I'm Don Carrol. I teach philosophy. I've had these guys in several classes. I look forward to having Evan again in the winter in Stoicism. And my degree's in philosophy and specifically ancient philosophy.
oh yeah, where'd you go to school?
I went to school at Emory. My undergraduate was University of Illinois, and then I went to Emory University and got my PhD.
Awesome.
I've also got a master's in psychology from Duquesne University.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Stud, really.
That's good. Yeah, stud on the podcast.
Yeah.
Stud on the podcast. And then to our right, of course, is your co-host, John Kent, and I'm Evan Holmes. And let's just get started. I think, again, I want to start at, a lot of people talk about, Stoicism, and in our generation, we hear the word be Stoic or Stoic a lot, but I feel like a lot of people, and myself included for a while, didn't really understand what this word meant, or what it means to truly live a Stoic lifestyle. So we just kind of want to start off hot, talk about that a little bit with someone who knows a lot about Stoicism. So
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I just wanted to start us off, also say that this is our second podcast. And just like how we're kind of new to this, Don is new to this, so we kind of just
Very.
threw him on the spot.
Yes.
So I guess, bear with us all, and, I'm really interested to see how
but
this is going
I
to go.
think a true
Yeah.
Stoic man would handle it well, wouldn't
No.
he?
That's the
Honestly,
question.
that's
How
the
would
question.
how would he handle it?
Yeah, would he handle it?
Just,
Yeah.
I'll let him answer that.
Well, I think 2 or 3 very important things that sort of guide the Stoic. The first of which is the sort of final goal of Stoicism, besides to be as natural as possible. And of course the Stoics have their own idea of what that means, is that they really want to find a state of, it's called ataraxia, which means freedom from disturbance. And that, so everything they do, they want to aim towards that particular goal.
Yeah.
And so to be a Stoic is to be someone who is calm and isn't disturbed by even the worst things, even torture, as with Seneca and even Epictetus. So that's the first thing, as the major goal. The other thing is that the Stoic believes that the only thing that is really good is virtue, and the only thing that is really bad is vice, and that it's really up to you in terms of your own decisions internally to be a good person or a bad person. And so the only way you can be harmed is you can only harm yourself, and you only harm yourself if you turn yourself into a bad person. And you're the only person that can really benefit yourself either, because you are the only person who can help you become virtuous and make virtuous decisions and act upon them. So those seem to be the two, and also that you should never. And this was interesting. I was just at a reunion in Milwaukee, and there was an old guy about my age, maybe a few years older, and he said that the thing that he learned in life that was the most helpful to him was, don't worry about anything that's outside of your control. That's a big Stoic doctrine, and that's what helps you be free from disturbance. You have control over whether you're virtuous ultimately or vicious. That's all up to you on how you act and the decisions you make. And if you make the right And so that's the only thing you really have to worry about, is those things that are ultimately under your control. like virtue and vice, and you don't really have to worry about anything else. I mean, that's what helps you also be free from disturbance, is that you know, what other people do. I mean, Marcus says you're going to meet a bunch of really horrible people in the day. Just get accustomed to that. And it doesn't have anything to do with you. You don't worry about them being bad people. You just have to focus on yourself and your actions and your virtue, and not let yourself start worrying about things that are outside of your control.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
I just
that's
have
fine.
a question for you. So what would you say to the people who, you know, because even myself, I feel like I can sometimes get affected by how other people are acting, and I can kind of find this excuse, well, you know, if they wouldn't have did this, then I wouldn't feel this way.
Right.
Which is,
Right.
you know, basically insinuating that they have control over me.
Yes.
So how would you, I guess for the people listening, like, how does someone break that chain of thinking? Like, you know, where does it stop? Like, how do you catch yourself in the moment, you know, letting yourself be kind of overtaken with this feeling that says, you're the reason I'm like this,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Like, how could you practice that, I guess, in certain examples?
I think the first thing is the thing you already realize is that, you know, if you continue to do that, it's just going to lead to further disturbances and trouble for yourself. So first you have to learn that, and then you catch yourself after the fact sometimes, you know, oh gosh, you catch yourself doing it, but you make it a habit. This is what the Stoics are really good at. They're always on the lookout for certain things, and that's a big danger. A Stoic is always worrying about, am I worrying about things that are outside of my control, like other people's opinions about me? So and Marcus Aurelius certainly was, and so you have to, I think the best thing to do, and I really like what Marcus Aurelius did, which was make a book of reminders, and a personal book of reminders. Remember, you know, and I think that's the only way you can do it. Just like the Buddhists do the same thing, or maybe almost most good spiritual traditions are going to give you 5 or 6 things to remember that are so important. And the only way to get yourself out of your previous habits is just to keep reminding yourself. And like Marcus, pick up that book and look at it and think, oh, I forgot about that. You know, I let myself get sucked in today.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen again. So I think it's a long, slow, hard process to do that. Just really hard.
And I think that I love everything that you said, and even I think for some people, hearing that, like for me, hearing everything you said, it's under your control and all these things makes it very comforting, because then I realize I have the power to whether or not I'm going to feel certain ways. And to some people, that may be too much, because they may think, oh, wow, like everything's you're just telling me this is all my own fault. And that's a hard realization for a lot of people. But I think even going deeper than not only just spiritual and religious practices, you know, remembering and how that makes a good spiritual person or philosophic person, that even just with everything, I think something I realize is just repetitions in general in life, whether that's in the gym or it's in schoolwork or it's in philosophy or in trying to build and cultivate this right-mindedness. It just takes repetition after repetition, and you're gonna, like you said, you're going to forget and you're going to fall down, but it's about picking yourself back up every time and being, oh, right, this is the way I need to go. This is where my nature is directing me. And re-tuning into that, and I think it's just a repetition process. But one question I would like to know is you keep bringing up this word disturbance. How would you define what you mean by disturbance? Like, is that a mind thing? Is it more like physical disturbances? Is it all of that?
It's exactly a mind thing. That's a great question. It's exactly a mind thing, and it's. I'm just trying to think how I would define that.
Oh, yeah, take your time.
In a good way. It's definitely connected with having a disordered mind and not maybe not even not necessarily only disordered emotion, because often we think it's just emotion that is the cause of my disturbances, but it could also be letting my desires get too large, letting them overcome me, because a Stoic is always on the lookout for that. They don't want that to happen. They don't want to be led around by the nose by desires.
So like people they can almost like become their desire.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, absolutely.
Like, as in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also you want to watch that your mind isn't disturbed in the sense of disordered, that it places too much value on the wrong things. And
Yeah, I feel like that's the last sentence you just said about placing too much value on certain things. But I think that's probably what I struggle with the most, was when in this age right now I'm almost trying to learn what I actually value. And that's a very painful process in a sense. So I guess, because you also mentioned something about naturalness, like
yes,
about being natural.
yes,
So and you also have people around this age who are like, I don't really know what my values are, but I want to know that if I choose these values, will they feel natural to me?
right.
So, how would you say going about that process? Like, how can you almost look at, how can Stoicism and philosophy almost guide you into that way of finding these values? Like what questions in time could you ask yourself, I guess, to really figure out, this is what I value and this is what feels like when does it feel natural, I guess, because a lot with repeating things, that's what I really struggle with about Stoicism, was that when I was repeating these things to me, I almost got caught up in trying to become the sentence.
Yes, yes.
Boxing myself into these certain words and not understanding that, like, even if you say, be still and be present, if you don't have a full grasp of what that word present means, then you won't really, and even if you do, it's probably being like, even it's just a word at the end of the day. So I don't really know where I was going with that, but
Well, I think it is interesting. I do think that a Stoic. I mean, Marcus Aurelius, what he did and who he was is, of course, very different than what any of us. And Epictetus was a slave, and a freedman and became a teacher. Seneca was a playwright and a teacher also, and an advisor to the emperor. So being a Stoic doesn't necessarily put you on one life path, and so figuring out what your life path is, what is natural for you, is very important, I think, and very difficult to do. And Nietzsche says, find those things that absolutely delight you. And also, personally, I think that you have to fish around, and I may have said this before, but it's like your cookie. Who you are, finding who you are, is like finding the ingredients that make the best dish. And you just keep tasting until you find all of the ingredients, because you keep thinking, and this happens to me over and over again, I'm missing something. And I think, my life's not right now. Even being 63 years old and a philosophy professor, you'd think I would have had it all figured out and in boxes and everything clear. But, in the process of life gets, dirty and, it's not clean, and you're always following the same path. So, like, I'll think, I'm not exercising. That's what it is. And I need to exercise. But then, how do I exercise? And I think you have to call to aid your imagination and imagine who do you want to be, sort of, and even with a picture, what do you want to look like? Who's around you? Where are you?
Yeah.
I think you just have to call your imagination in, and I think your imagination will fill those things out, along with thinking, what do I absolutely love? What when I wake up in the morning, I mean, Evan is very committed to physical exercise and thinking about it, and thinking about it and trying to figure out what's the best way to do it and stuff. So it seems like, I mean, that's got to be a major ingredient to who you are, right? So, yeah, I think you just have to find those things. When I wake up in the morning, I know I like to translate, I like to do languages. So I wake up in the morning, I look forward to trying to read Greek or Latin. That's what I really like. And so it's those things that you wake up that you think, well, what would make a great day? What would really make a great day? And then see how you can incorporate those in your life in a meaningful way. Because the way you do it may not be the way that you see somebody else doing it. Because like I think about physical exercise. I have a particular way of exercising that I like to do, and there are other ways that I recognize intellectually are better for me. But when I try to do them, I don't keep them up. And I realize I will never do that.
Yeah.
So I have to find what I can do, and then also what will I do.
Yeah.
So those are important and difficult questions.
Yeah.
I think going through, and when you read meditations and stoicism in general, there is this, he mentions over and over again this idea of nature and what nature demands. And when I think about, and I'd love to hear your opinion, but when I think about all of what you've said, and then in my own life, and I think there's levels to what he means by nature. I think that at first there is, the nature of a human being, which we've talked about.
Right.
And that's just, you wake up in the morning and you have things to do and you should go do them because that's what nature requires. And I think on another level, nature is naturally just what is put in front of you. So I think this idea of, you mentioned that, like, we all relate to really feeling like this next thing is going to be the thing that makes me happy. This next thing, once I get this many books read or this many followers or whatever it is, these things we think it's going to get us to where we want to be, but I think it's actually what he's saying is it's the opposite. It's what's put in front of you right now and what you have. Like, it's almost a sense of like needing to be content with where you are and what like nature is demanding of you right now. And then I think on another level, what you're talking about is like, what is your specific nature? So what are you naturally inclined to enjoy?
Good.
And that deep down, like you said, if it just takes, everyone has like a nature and what they enjoy, but they just have to do some digging sometimes to really, a lot of people don't stop and think about that. They just think, oh, I need to make money or these other things that we think we need to do, but they don't spend time thinking about what truly, like you said, they get up in the morning and they can't stop thinking about, or 3 hours go by and they're done doing it and they didn't even know it was 3 hours.
Right.
And I think that finding that, the more of your own nature you find, the more content you then become with life and what you have around you. And then you're more in line with like your nature is like how I have been thinking about it. So.
Right. And I.
Sorry, you were going to say.
Go ahead.
And I think like contentness is such a hard concept to live by because it's such like I want to feel content, but I also want to be ambitious towards life. And people can mistake, and even I still mistake, where the fearfulness that comes up with being content is like, if I decide to be content, then there's not much more to me. Like, there's not much more I can find because I've accepted the good and bad parts of me. And you have that other feeling where it's like, I don't want to accept these parts of me, who I am right now, because I don't like these. So that's why contentness, I feel like, doesn't make certain, because like, be content with yourself. And it's like, how could I be content with, certain people who may including me, like who may struggle with like self-love, like you can kind of. I remember when I was first getting into stoicism, and it was like this acceptance of this is where you're at right now, like, and I just kind of felt this. I always kind of turned my back to stoicism because it was like I don't want to accept that this is who I am right now because
Right.
I hope that there's more to me.
Right.
But I know that there's something in that concept that kind of just gets misconstrued. Like I don't think it's telling you to like. It's on a deeper level where it's saying, because Eckhart Tolle talks about this, that no matter who leads or who goes, it can never take away from the true worthiness of your being. Like, so, and that's where I feel like that's kind of where stoicism is like, no matter what, like you have to, nothing is, it's kind of says like, you know, you hear in all these scriptures and everything says, even in the Bible or in other books, it's like everything you need is within you. And I feel like that's like a constant theme with stoicism. Like,
It is, but I think it's also a constant thing that you have to develop it and work on it, and that generally they only put up as sort of fully formed human beings. They often say, okay, Socrates and Diogenes, those are the two people who have sort of got it all right and completely developed virtue. So in Stoicism, it's like, it's right. You don't want to be content because you don't want to, there are certain parts of yourself that you should not be content with because you haven't developed virtue in those ways or areas, or maybe you have bad impulses that need to be gotten rid of. So you do want to keep always working on yourself. Even Epictetus says, I'm not anywhere close to having developed the kinds of virtues I need. And he was an incredible human being, I think. So Seneca will say the same thing. Marcus Aurelius will certainly say that. So you do want to be free from disturbance, but you really can't rest. You got to work. To be a Stoic means you're going to be working all the time. To try to develop naturally, and to develop naturally again, since God has given you a spark of reason, what you really need to do is use that reason to develop yourself properly. Use your thought to develop yourself properly. And there's this odd thing about, in Marcus Aurelius certainly, and in Epictetus, I don't know in Seneca, but about there's the sort of, God has already planned everything out, and you have to be content with the role that God gave you. And that seems to be close to what you were talking about, but you do want to, just because Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, he can't rest. Who wouldn't want to be rest content? I'm the Roman emperor. I'm the most powerful person in the world. But Marcus doesn't rest content. He's always working every day and reminding himself and trying to be more and more virtuous every day, and not let himself get sucked into things that he can't control.
do you ever wonder where that motivation would come from? I always thought about that with Marcus. Like, he has all these vices that are just screaming. I mean, he can do practically anything that he wants. So, like, for a lot of the stories, there's a motivation behind why someone chooses good. And there wasn't someone, like, in, society tells you that this is good. And when Marcus he has, like, at his snap, he can have everything he wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he chooses to, like, he already knows that in that time that this is not what I want.
Right.
Like, he didn't have to, I feel like, experience it and be a bad emperor for 20 years and then switch his life around and then become good. And he was like this from the beginning. And I always was like, where does that motivation to be good come from?
I always wonder if he didn't, and all these great thinkers didn't have the experience that all of this stuff that around them isn't going to fulfill them. They had the actual experience of, like the Buddha, that everything is unsatisfactory around here. It's just not going to do it. And it's, it's odd, but I think in a luxurious society like he was in and like we're in today, and I always wonder if this isn't why Stoicism is popping up today, is I think it's a great philosophy, but it may be popping up because we're living in such a luxurious society and we're piling up all of our stuff, and we're realizing in our heads all of this stuff out here, it's not doing it for me.
Because the more and more that you get, the more and more you see other people get, almost sometimes the less and less good you feel inside. And you think it would be the opposite, but it's not. And that's when you start to realize, like you said, you start to realize, oh, these things. And I think what Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism talks about a lot, that I think is really pertinent to this, is the idea of everything is changing. I mean, throughout the book, Marcus just says, remember how short you have. Remember all things wither and die. And he talks a lot about even your body. It's going to be, bones and ashes soon. And that really speaks to even what the Buddha, preached. And it's like, none of this, it's all temporary. And that means anything that exists in the outside world that's temporary, the happiness that you're going to get from it will also be temporary. Yeah. And so that's why these teachings ask you to go further and look deeper down and at what's inside of you, and because it's like, well, if I'm trying to get what I want and then I get what I want and it's still not working,
right,
maybe I should try doing what my nature then demands of me, or what nature in general, what is occurring naturally and putting in front of me. And then you start to realize, oh, okay, this is really that's what, and he says in the book, that's what a pig does. That's what a bird does. They do what a bird is supposed to do. Right. And so they follow what their nature demands of them. And so why do we think that we would be any different?
Right.
So I think having that type of mindset, and even going back to the, I think the paradox of being content, but also knowing you need more or wanting more for yourself and wanting a better you, it comes with, you have to shift your mindset of, it's not that you should be content with who you are, but it's that you should be, I think another, value of theirs is to be doing your best. And if you're doing your best every day, like you said, and you're working towards a better you, that's what you should be content in. That you'll never reach the horizon, essentially. You'll never reach that point where you're like, okay, I'm now a perfect man. Right. It's never going to happen. You're still always going to be battling against that. But it's the idea of being content in the struggle and in the journey, and just knowing that it's a continuous process of improvement, I think is really something that it teaches.
Point, yeah.
And that's a real wise thing to know. I mean, one of my favorite Chinese sayings is that the wise person treats what is difficult as difficult. And oftentimes people, myself included, think that it's going to be easy. And when I think that it's going to be easy and I start out and it's difficult, I say, screw this, I'm not going to do this anymore. I should have had this done by last week.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it seems so, that quote seems so simple, but when you dive into it, you're so right, because so many people, let's take even just the gym, for example, they go in there and they try to work out, and they realize how hard it is, and they're like, man, I thought this was going to be easy. What made you think it was going to be easy? Yeah. And in fact, I think Marcus and many Stoics would agree is that, like, the more, it doesn't always work like this, but the more value something has, usually the more difficult it is to attain. So I think people miss that relationship, and they just expect things to be easy.
Right.
When they should really, like you said, it's all about, when you start something, what determines if you'll get to where you want to go is how you set your expectations at the beginning, almost. Yeah. Like you said, like, let's say you have a hard test coming up in 2 days, and if you have the mindset of like, oh, I'm going to fail this exam, it's going to be, or, well, let's take the opposite. It's going to be, this exam's going to be cake, I don't really need to work that hard for it. And then you don't study that much, and then you end up failing because you underestimated and you didn't have the right expectations. Whereas instead, if you planned accordingly and had the expectations of like, okay, this might actually be pretty difficult, I need to plan in accordance to how difficult it's going to be and prepare myself. I think the same goes with anything in life. I think that preparation and right expectation.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry. it's like the same when I was in your class, like have I had you 2 years or 1 year?
Only one.
I've only had you once.
I think it was only in the Hellenistic, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I took Hellenistic philosophy with him, and it was a great class. That's when I really started liking certain philosophers, and I think exactly what Evan was saying was one day when we had a presentation to do over Epictetus, right? And I was working on it a couple days before. I remember getting so mad at myself, and I was just like, golly, this is hard. And I realized I just didn't finish my readings. If I would have just finished my readings, then I probably would know what to put on this.
Yeah.
But then I just tried to like not really finish my readings, and then also
Somehow expect
create some great work, and then be like, oh my God, why can't I just do this? How come everyone else, like, they seem like they don't struggle with this, struggle with that? But it's really like, my mama always used to say that to me, John. She was just like, well, John, now how'd you do in your test? I was like, I didn't do great. She was like, did you study? I was like, I mean, not for real. Like, she was like, well, okay then. She was like, if you just do what you're supposed to do.
Right, but then your brain the whole time, or you even probably to your mom was like, well, but mom, the exam, I didn't know this was going to be on it, and I didn't know, and the professor, he's hard when he talks, he's not very, I can't understand him that well. It's like, no, you're trying to blame, then there you go again, trying to control what you can't control, and not controlling what you can control.
Right.
Because he tells you to look over the literature, look through it, annotate, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, and then still expected to like do good or make a great work of art. He's like, there's people literally laying out instructions for you to, John, for you to like do this well, and then you go away from the instructions and think that you have just like this hidden talent of like producing great art on the fly. And like, I like to think that about myself, but like, it just really is such a, if you just do what you're supposed to do and what the instruction says, or then it will probably get you closer to where you want to be than you just thinking that you have this creative inner superpower that's going to come out of nowhere. You're just going to automatically understand philosophy. And you're going to be able to present it in a way. It's like, I think it's great. Imagination is great. But someone who also just kind of, sometimes I'm like daydreaming, I'm a little lost. I realize that like, there's a handout or a template for a reason.
Yes, yes.
Like, but a weird, like, bad part, like, a part of me just wants to go against the grain, just, like, kind of feel like I don't have to study that much, or I don't know how to, and then it just ends up showing. So I kind of, that's what I'm really learning my senior year is, like, John, if you just do what they're telling you to do, you're not going to struggle with that. Like,
and I feel like that's getting into kind of your ego, because you want to be able to be the guy who doesn't do the work but can still get a really good grade because you're just naturally smart and all this type of stuff. And I think I wish I had the specific verse to pull up, but in Meditations he was talking about why do you should, once the good work is done, that's what you should take pride in, is that you have done good work.
Right.
And that it shouldn't matter if he says something, there shouldn't matter if there's an audience of thousands or none at all.
Right.
And he talks about that a lot. It's just like, why are you looking for external validation you're looking for clapping hands, and those clapping hands will soon forget about you.
Yes.
Very soon. And that's what he talks about a lot. Why are you placing a value in something? Again, it goes back to things are going to change and wither and die, and why are you placing value in that if, again, it's just short term and it's almost just hollow. So.
Yeah, although I think, Giant, I think you're at a place, sort of the start of wisdom, because it's like the Socratic thing that you really have to know that you don't know. You can't hold on to that ego thing that you do know everything, because then you won't ever learn. You can't learn anything. You're in a position where you're in a hopeless position. You're just going to continue the same way for the rest of your life because you think you know it. But you've realized, and I think everybody has to realize, I really don't know it. And I need to work on it, as well as Evan talking about expectations. As I live and grow older, I just realize just how important expectations are, and how getting the expectations right is really what's going to make my day into a good day or a bad day even. You know, if I have unrealistic expectations, or again, like the Stoics, if I place my expectations for good or bad outside of myself, and I have to have people clapping for me, and that doesn't come off, then my day is going to be crappy.
Yeah, like it all depends on how other people react to you, depends on your state of happiness. Like how much, kind of like, if you get first place in a race and you don't have a lot of people clapping, like, will you look at what you're doing as, oh, I'm doing this and I enjoy it, or will I did this for the external?
Right.
And if I did this for the external to react in a certain way, and if it doesn't,
Yeah.
then if anything, you're just like, you want to feel the reactions of other people, because that means that what you did was worth it.
Right.
But the key is to realize that, and which I always reiterate to myself that every moment is worth it. This is worth it because it's here. You know, kind of really emphasizing that all this is for you, but not in a self-centered way. But like, whenever you find yourself, you know, doing things for a certain outside, I guess, validation, when that doesn't pay off for me for a certain amount of time, I hit myself with the biggest question of, why am I really doing this then?
Mm-hmm.
And because kind of what you did before is probably good works, and it's probably enough where you can identify with it and take pride in it. But when you realize that you weren't really doing it for you and you're doing it for other people, then all this pride and good works that you did just becomes this sloppy image of like, you don't look at, like, looking back at it, it's like there's a little bit of shame and just like fear and confusion, but it's good works, you know?
Right.
So like,
I think also putting having those outside expectations on how you want people to react to what you've created, like you said, if it's a good work or whatever it is that you're trying to get people to look at, that work now no longer is clear cut in reality what it is to you and how you see it. You're going to perceive it with almost like there's a lens over top of how you're perceiving it now that changes colors and shape and distortion based on how other people's react to it.
Right.
So let's say you try to do something and you have others in mind or how they're going to view it, and they view it well, then it's like, oh, awesome. And I can even take from my own life with my Instagram and my shorts that I make. And, you know, if some of my short form content ends up doing really well, then I'm receiving that as, okay, this means I have put out a really good piece of work. But then if it doesn't do well, all of a sudden, even though it could be just as good as that other piece of content I made, or even better, if it doesn't do how I expect people to react to it, now all of a sudden the perception of it has changed for me, and now I look at it as like, oh, that wasn't worth it. I wasted time doing that. And
Right.
you can kind of have this, you know, it really can shift your perception. So I think it's really important to like look at things for how they do things for you and how you would value them, or if it's valuable to you, and if you believe in it. And I think if you believe in it, then that's all that really should matter at the end of the day. So,
Yeah.
Don, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
This podcast has definitely been like all over.
It's been 45 minutes already.
Oh, has it really?
I feel like it's been like 29.
Yeah.
Dang, that's crazy. Don,
That looks like an old piece of paper that you found in a...
this is like
I was thinking like in a tomb in
this is
Egypt
like a
or
book
something.
that
Oh,
I
that's
write in.
cool. I like
Yeah.
that. Wow.
So I was like, I'm gonna rip a piece of paper out, and this is definitely this is the vibe of philosophy. This paper gets off because when I write in that book a lot, it has a very like oldie, it's just I open it and it just makes me write life so much more artistically and serious
I'm gonna use
and
that.
meaningful. And I just really like And you wouldn't really think that a book can do that to your little journal, but just certain, like, even feeling a page
Yeah.
like this is just going to give you
And
a.
that's, I think that's perfect. I think you want to look for quality over quantity, and that's what that is. You
Definitely.
have a qualitative life experience there versus just having more and more and more,
Yeah.
or quicker and quicker and quicker.
Just
Yeah.
takes a moment to kind of realize, to like add a little bit, just go a little bit extra, and like me not stepping out my comfort zone, but just choosing I'm gonna try this and see how much more that
Right,
adds to
right. No, that's
being, I guess, or to how something is. Don, what would you? I haven't. I've never been the greatest fan of Stoicism, but I have a friend. His name is, and I like Stoicism. I just kind of find it hard for me myself to live by. But I have a friend. He's like my best friend. He was since I was growing up, and he was he was very much, I would define, a natural Stoic, and I mean he was one who just kind of, even though his name was Taji, and even though his situation was bad or anything, he was always able to just kind of accept what is. And he would always, the best piece of advice that he ever gave me was, I failed a test one day in high school, and I was just like so worried about it, or maybe it was like that. I don't know what grade I was gonna get back yet, but he said to me, he was like, John, why worry about it? It's already over.
yeah.
It's like, what do you figure out from worrying? And what you realize is that, like, you never come to this great conclusion or idea from worrying. If anything, you're thinking about how terrible it could all end up. Like, you're not, I'm going to worry, oh, this is what I'll do. No, you're more like, what am I going to do?
Right.
And you never get to this is what I'm going to do
Yeah.
until, like,
It's always negative.
yeah, it's most of the time always negative. And that was such, like, a relief for me. Like, I kind of, just like, there's no reason to worry. And like, there's a day out there where you will need to worry, but save your energy for those days, you know?
Yeah.
And I think one of the questions that I guess I was going to ask you is, what do you think philosophy can do for people? Like, do you feel like people need it? Do you feel like being stoic, like, where do you feel like, because you gravitated towards philosophy for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if, it was like, I went to philosophy because I'm really wanting to seek the truth. Like, you couldn't help but be drawn to the truth. Or it was like, man, this is just something I'm good at. So I guess asking you, how can philosophy help people, and what does philosophy mean to you?
I think the main thing it is, and this is what the Stoics were. What I admire so much about them is that it helps you figure out what is good and how to attain it. What's the best life? What should I be doing in this life? Because we all start off with certain beliefs about that based upon our upbringing, but to really investigate it and have good reasons for why you should do certain things rather than just doing it because everybody else is doing it is what I wanted. Because I really do think that being a good person is the most important thing that you can do.
So do you believe that there is a good and... See, and that's an idea that I've been pondering a lot too lately, Don, which has been messing with me. Well, I wouldn't say messing with me, but it's just fun to think about, is there a good and bad? And there probably is there has to, right? You would think that there has to be certain determinants
Mm-hmm.
that are strong enough to determine, okay, this is good,
Mm-hmm.
this is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what was something that I've been struggling with is that there was this, where my morals were the most tested in certain situations, And I realized that, oh, if I break this moral, then, like, it's okay. I can just, forgive myself later or feel okay. And what I'm starting to realize just about people is that people can choose to be flexible with their morality when it benefits them the most.
Uh-huh.
So realizing that I wish life and people were as simple as good and bad, but understanding that there are good and bad in everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and just wanting to make, like how you said, better decisions, like
Mm-hmm.
every day, and realizing that if morality is something that, it's your values and something that it's your guide almost, like, right? And when those morals are really put to the test, do you feel like people can kind of have this on where like for this certain situation, I'll be flexible here.
Right, right.
And then they can kind of like bend themselves back to, it's
I
like,
do.
what do you think about that, I guess?
I think done once, it's not such a bad deal, depending on what you're doing. But I think that you get into the habit of doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you always in ethics. I think I do better when I remind myself, who do I want to be? Do I want to be that person who's always kind of bends the rules a little bit so I can get by with something? Or do I want to be a person who kind of stands up and says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's wrong. I'm not going to do that. So I think you really have to remind. This is what I do whenever I get into those situations, and when I come out of them successfully, let's say, and I don't bend it to fit myself. It's when I remind myself, who do I want to be? Because if I keep doing this, and there's a good chance I will if I get by with it, then that's the person I'm going to be. I'm going to be the person who always tries to squirm out of things and not do the right thing, but sort of do the right thing, but not do the right thing. So, yeah, I think that's what I have to remind myself. And I think, the other thing that philosophy is very good at, because the good is tied to your human nature, is figuring out who we are. And that's a real fascinating question for me that I've always wondered is, who are we, what are we? Not who am I, what am I also, but who are we, what are we? Because I agree with the Stoics and Aristotle, even though they come to different conclusions, that you have to act according to your nature. And so in order to do that, you have to figure out what your nature is. So, and if you figure out what your nature is, you can figure out what is good and bad for you. Because being good will be acting in accordance with your nature, and being bad will be acting against your nature.
So what do you feel like draws you to Aristotle so much? Like what does Aristotle preach like that just kind of resonates with you the most? Because I remember you telling me how like that is your favorite philosopher, Aristotle.
Yeah.
How is Aristotle so significant to you?
I just think, insofar as I understand him, he's right about those major issues, the major questions, the answers to the major questions, and that I love the way he comes to the answers. I find his way of thinking through a problem very, very just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way that, I hope from my reading and studying and stuff that I would pick it up myself. I hope to be able to, I would like to be able to do that sort of naturally. The way Aristotle thinks through a problem, I would like to be able to do that. And of course, he's not the only philosopher that I like, but if there's one, if you said I had to choose one, I would have to choose him because I like what answers he gets, and I like how he comes to those answers. I just really love to watch him think through a problem, and he almost always surprises me. And I think I wouldn't have thought, I couldn't have done that.
Yeah, I think
Figure that out.
what you said with, I think what you really, one thing you said that was really key is the question, who do I want to be? And I think Aristotle, from what I understand, and I think you know him a lot better than I do, but from what I understand is that he is very good at that question. Who do I want to be? And if who I want to be is a good man, what does that look like? What is good and bad for me in that sense? And I think asking that question in all situations in life, really understanding like your intention behind the things that you're doing, because I think a lot of times we all act without intention sometimes, and when we are not acting with intention, we feel it, but we don't know it in the sense of like we can talk about it to other people, but we sense that we aren't having that intention, and that's why. Oh, I feel like I need more in my life. I feel like my life's not going the way I want it to. I feel like I should be doing something different. You sense that you don't have the right intention behind things.
Right.
And so I think that always asking that question of who do I want to be, that, and what would that person then do to be that way, and then you just do those things, and then it's very clear cut, and it cuts out a lot of the confusion. And I think, like you said, it's not like there's just going to be this one-off time where it's like, okay, normally I know that this is the way I should behave, or this is how I should go about this, but I really want this thing, so I'm going to bend the rules just this one time. It's never just a one-time thing. It's always, how you do one thing is how you do everything else, and I think that's so true in this situation, because it goes back to, like, if you're a certain person, then you wouldn't do that. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, or if it is going to benefit you in this way. It's more about you're aligning with your nature and not what your desires or what you want. And so I think that what you said right there was like really.
And bro, I remember asking you like 5 months. It took me forever to really figure out what the word intention meant. You remember I was so, Evan, I'd be like, bro, what do you mean by intention? Like, how do you be intentional? Because I would say those words and I just wouldn't feel them. Like, you know, it's a very strange moment in life when you say words and you don't feel them, and then you're like, well, what else more am I supposed to do? If I'm saying this and I don't feel it, then what do I keep telling myself again? Do I stop? You know, it's a lot of that. And what I realized through talking to people, which finally dawned on me, intention is, it's like in a conversation, it's like, are you asking this person a question because you want to make them feel good? You want to make them, you want to show them that you're interested in them? Are you asking this person a question just because you want to avoid the awkward moment? Are you asking this person a question just because you want to please them or make yourself feel better? And I realized that I'm asking this person a question because I want to know the answer to this question, to that question I'm asking. And that's how you be intentional in communication. And that's where you ever ask somebody a question and then you just kind of go unconscious and you turn your brain off. And then you're like, oh, I'm not really caring about I'm not really caring about the question that I asked, but I asked it. So it's like, who's asking that? You know, is it the persona that's still going? Is it you still acting out these habitual conversational tendencies that you've gotten so used to because you know it's been your way of getting out of certain moments? But that's what's been helping me a lot lately is caring about the answer that someone's going to give me to the question, that remind me that I really do care about what I'm asking them.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
even if you do, even sometimes you can say I do care, and you can really say you care. You can feel you care. You can feel like you care, or you can say that you care. But if you don't feel it literally in your body that you care, that you're here, and then you'll just feel terrible. Because that's kind of how I felt for a long time. You know, I used to tell myself, "Oh, I actually care about this, and I care about this," but I couldn't do it. I couldn't show myself well enough so that I actually felt it. I was just more of a record just repeating itself. Well, remind yourself, John, and then you don't feel, because you're not even, when you remind yourself, it's just like, after a while, I'll get it down. Because you're thinking in the future, like, if I keep reminding myself this for 3 months, I bet 9 months from now, I'm going to be so good at, but it's really like, no, like, realize, like, this could be your last day. And if you would stop gauging yourself in the future of like, if I keep doing this for a certain amount of time, by then, who knows? If you just realize that today, if I can just be like this today, it's really who knows, you know, not, you don't want to just keep trying to guess yourself. In 9 months, I'll just be so much better than, I feel like that is even in that, which I used to fall into that thinking a lot. When I first got into reading books, I used to be like, bro, if I keep reading for like 6 more months, dude, I could be so articulate. No. And I still say the word like in like every 2 sentences. And it just, you know, it's like,
It's like
the world will show
like-
yourself, will show you like how to be humble. Like it really will.
But I think
So-
that the definition that you gave of intention was really good, and I think it even takes us all the way back to the beginning when we talk about, you know, people say that they're stoic, and even I think a common misconception is that a stoic man or a stoic woman or person is someone who just doesn't experience emotion and, you know, doesn't ever talk and super quiet and kept to themselves. But I think there's a subtle difference between not talking and then only talking when you have something you actually want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that where that definition of intention fits in is, you know, can you be comfortable with the urge to, let's say, like you mentioned, there's an awkward silence and you have that urge, you feel that urge coming up and you feel that urge, you don't like how there's something uneasy about what's going on in the conversation, and or the conversation isn't happening, and you're not necessarily super comfortable with that person yet, so you're like, oh man, your brain starts coming up with all these things you should say. But then it's like, if you're saying these things just with the intention of removing the awkward silence, therefore you're no longer saying the thing because you mean it or asking the question because you want to know the answer. You're saying it because you want to remove that awkward silence. And I think that, you know, part of that practicing that stoicism is resisting. It's an urge or it's a disturbance in your brain saying things are not right, you need to do something. And, you know, being able to resist that disturbance or watch it go by and then only speak when you truly have something to say or you really want to know about. I think that's pretty huge too.
Yeah.
And I
That
think
intention.
what you guys were both saying about watching very closely what you're doing is very much a Stoic attitude, this notion of paying attention. Because the Stoics, I mean, there's places where Epictetus says, you know, maybe I'll just take today off, or it might be Marcus, maybe I'll just take today off. I'm tired of paying attention to every goddamn thing I do.
It's
You know,
exhausting.
it's exhausting.
It's
yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
It's tiring.
But
It's so tiring.
to get the proper intention and make sure you got the proper intention, you have to have that attention towards what you're doing. And I liked what you said about being able to feel in your body, because I do think that's the goal of philosophy. You have to be able to feel all these things in your body, and if you don't, you're not there yet. You just got the words.
Yeah.
And you don't want to just have the words. I think you want to feel it and live it. And so being a bad person should be actually, you should feel that. You should feel yuck in your body when you think of that. And a virtuous person, you should feel, you know, shivers up and down your spine when you think
Yeah.
about that. So I think that's a great attitude that you had. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to read this from the book. It goes back to the earlier question Giant asked about how do you view philosophy or why you're attracted to it. And Marcus says, and not to think of philosophy as your instructor, but as the sponge and egg white that relieve ophthalmia, as a soothing ointment, a warm lotion, not showing off your obedience to the logos, but resting in it. Remember, philosophy requires only what your nature already demands. What you've been after everything else, after something else, again, is after something, what you've been after is something else, again, something unnatural.
Yep, exactly. And I think that figuring out what's natural, because naturally you're always going towards that, but you don't know what it is, and you're screwing up. You're thinking it's pleasure, you're thinking it's honor, you're thinking it's wealth, and none of those things are satisfactory. None of them are satisfactory because none of them are natural. Natural to who we are as human beings. So certainly in the ancient worldview, you have to know what is natural in order to know what is good, because what is good is following the natural, and happiness or anything only comes from finding what is natural and following it. So,
Yeah, and I think, and something I want to expand onto that is how he talks about it's not your instructor, and it's almost the way he views philosophy is it's something that I should want naturally, because it's like a soothing ointment, it's a blanket, it's something that provides warmth and shelter and is going to help me along this journey. It's not something that I should feel like I'm forced to learn or I need to learn. And I think I want to expand that onto something I wanted to talk to you about as well, which is your attitude towards learning in general, and how you think that's that willingness to learn, lifelong learning, instead of, if you had the mentality of, oh, learning, I have to learn because I know I need to, you wouldn't be in this position.
No.
You wouldn't be who you are at all. And I think that it's probably something I would assume is very valuable to use, the way you view learning and the way you view philosophy, and how it's not something that you need to learn, or it's something that you should look forward to as something, as reprieve almost from the world.
Oh, very much so. I think,
Yeah.
and when I think about retirement, I think, what am I going to do in retirement? And I have no doubt. I mean, I'm going to go through Aristotle's metaphysics, and I'm going to keep reading all this stuff and learning this stuff, and it just really makes me excited to think about that, to be able to do that sort of thing. And also, one thing that I've found through my life is that I have to allow myself to be a beginner all the time if I'm ever going to learn anything. And I was a lower middle class kid, farm kid from Illinois, and I've always had I always want to take the risk, because I know what happens if you don't take the risk. Then you end up not doing anything, or with regrets in your life. I never want to have regrets, and so I've done lots of different things, and I did them because they seemed interesting, and also because I didn't want to go through life and think, I could have done that, I could have tried that, but I was too scared to, or I didn't want to look like an idiot, because everybody looks like an idiot at the beginning.
In order to do new things, you have to be new at things.
Yeah.
And that's very
and it's hard for people to
It's
accept,
really
because
hard.
that gets to that ego again. If you don't know something, you don't want to see people. Oh,
you don't want to know.
I'm not going to ask that question, because then they're going to know I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's okay. The whole thing is that nobody knows. Look at our government. Like, we don't know. No one knows.
No one knows.
Look at the world. It's like no one really knows right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's okay, bro, if you don't know. Like,
So, Don, what would
learn,
you say
you know?
philosophy says about overcoming fear? Because that's exactly where you're getting at.
Yeah, I think you've had to find out what really ought to be feared and what really shouldn't be feared.
There are things that should.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should fear.
What is
Like the
real
Stoics,
motivation?
you should fear vice. You should definitely fear being a bad person.
And if your concept of being a bad person includes, and what it usually does with the Stoics, is someone who isn't doing their rightful duties as a human,
Right,
which is to
right.
provide your own natural talents to the world,
Right.
then that goes along with, okay, then it's natural to, you want to make sure that fear is well placed, and so it would be bad of you to not try new things,
Right.
and to not learn, because then you're not giving what you could to the world and what you're supposed to give.
Exactly. That would be a very well-founded fear, and that's a fear you should act upon.
Uh-huh.
I think. Yeah, I think that's right.
Because I think fear can motivate in the right place.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fear and shame, both, I think, can be good motivators. I remember reading, this is not Stoicism, but it's St. Augustine, whenever his conversion experience to being a Christian came out of shame, because another man converted almost immediately right in front of him, and Augustine wanted to, but he was scared and ashamed of trying to be a Christian, and it was actually just the shame himself feeling, why is this guy able to do it and I'm not able to do it. So sometimes shame can be a good motivator. You don't want to really, I mean, Aristotle says it's not really a virtue because you only feel shame when you've done bad things. So you don't want to be doing bad things so that you can feel shame. But shame can, in certain circumstances, be a good motivator.
Yeah, it's like almost like a survival checkpoint. It's like, oh, watch out, this doesn't feel good.
That's right.
Trying to save you from something.
Yeah.
And you gotta realize whether that's your brain just telling you that, or you actually like, okay, this is making sense, or because sometimes you, again, like how you said, you can fear the wrong thing. There can be things that there's no reason to be feared.
Right.
Just like how, with certain people of like going up to talk to, new people, or the girl that you like, the guy that you like, or going to go ask the teacher for help. Or it can be that fear that's just around it. That's just kind of lingering there, like, because it's like one thing you can't control is how other people react to you.
Right.
And that's one thing that, if you could just accept that, then all your other connections will open up so much more. Like with people, with new people that you don't know, for example, like you have this fear about, oh my gosh, what if they kind of don't accept me? Then what does that say about me? You're looking for this person to say something about you, and
Right.
there's nothing that needs to be said about you.
Right.
You're okay with how you are, but I'm not going to sit there and say that I completely feel that way all the time, because I don't. There's days that I wake up and the words that just came out of my mouth are really hard to even know that I said them.
Uh-huh.
And I think, but that's like the greatest like hook in human life. It's like, right? It's like, I feel like being a human is like the greatest, like, you got to be quicker than that. Like, right? It's like always, but like once you get going and you get moving on this, like there's this, I always say, like this fearful optimism. You feel the fear, but you feel the optimism. But fear isn't overtaking the optimism. The optimism isn't overtaking the fear, where it's smushed. Like they can just kind of meet each other. You can almost feel this way. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's like, I'm going to do it. It's like, I'm going to do it. Like, it's kind of that feeling,
Right.
But I think just, sorry, I kind of got off.
That's a good psychological analysis, I think.
So-
Really.
One thing I'd like to ask you then on that is, and you can answer this however you want, and I'll give an example of my own first, but what is a big fear that you had in your life at some point and that you had to overcome in order to become the man you are today?
Yeah.
Like, I think for me personally, I had to deal a lot with showing my true colors and being who I really felt like I wanted to be, versus because I struggled very much with what John talks about with, I used to always look around and think everybody was looking at me and wondering about me. And I had to really, there were things I wanted to do, such as, starting an Instagram, or even just becoming really into fitness at first. I had to quit the tennis team in order to do that, and, break certain molds. And that was a big fear for me, is how people are going to view me. And I had to really, but that fear was necessary to motivate me to overcome it, to become, I think, the man I am today, who can now show to the world, this is who I am, this is what I'm into, and, if you don't like it, you don't have to like it.
Yeah.
So what would be an example?
Oh, mine would be very, very similar to that, that overcoming the fear of what people would think of me. Especially, if you travel in academic circles and you've got a little southern twang in your voice and you were a farm kid, I always feel a little bit like I'm a bit of an imposter, they call that imposter syndrome stuff. And that there's something to that. But yeah, to be able to open my mouth and say something, take a chance, maybe even hesitate, work through something without knowing ahead of time what you're going to say. I have to get up in front of people all the time, and that's still a little bit of a fear for me. And I was kind of a shy kid, and I didn't talk in college. I think it would have been better if I had, but I didn't. Really, that same fear. What are people thinking of me?
You know,
That's an incredibly.
yeah, Don, that's so crazy because I wrote something the other day, and I think it was like just like how Evan, like, you know, you have that fear, of worrying that someone's thinking about you, and it's fearful because you can't control what they think.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you could control what they think, would you really want to? Like if God or somebody came down here with powers, like, here, you
Yeah.
have the power to control what somebody thinks about you,
Yeah.
and think like that, like what would that? What would,
That's-
well, that's not no point. And then one day, what made me really realize that two things that I've realized, and because I still struggle with it, but people are not judging you as harshly as you judge yourself. So like, you know, you can kind of judge yourself harshly, and you think the way that you judge yourself,
Yeah.
you know, John, how could you do this? Like, why would you leave your clothes at home? And then you think, oh my God, what would they think about? They probably, you know, you're kind of seeing these people, you're seeing these people's reactions that haven't even happened yet. Or you're really assuming, like you're playing into this whole thing of like, assuming that this is what people are thinking about me. And then you feel the way that you, and the thing is, you don't even know what
No.
that they're
So the thing
thinking
is
about. You
that
don't know.
You have the backstage VIP tickets. You're the one that knows what's going on in there, and you know all your flaws. You know every time you've done something that you're ashamed of that other people don't know about, but they don't know. That's the thing, and that's what helped me change my mindset a lot with anxiety. Is I realized all these terrible things I'm thinking people are going to think about me.
Oh,
They have no clue.
That's right.
They don't even
They
know
don't have
that
any
I.
access
They don't
to
even
those.
know that
Yeah.
I did that one thing in 5th grade
Right.
that made me look stupid. They don't
Right.
know any of
Yeah.
that. To me, to them, I'm just some 21-year-old dude. Like they don't.
But
know
you walk
nothing.
out into the
Especially
world,
if they just
like,
met you, right? And
Yeah.
but you walk out in the world thinking they know all
They
this
know
stuff,
all this.
all my
And-
dirt.
And it isn't
right
like
there.
it isn't like hide. It isn't like, oh, now I'm hiding these bad parts. But it's just that like giving yourself that ease. And one day I realized like the situation that I'm talking about is, it was like maybe a month or two ago. I was walking back from late at night. We went out and we went somewhere, and I just heard these like people, and they were like very dressed up, and they were just like, and it was late at night. It was kind of chilly. I was in one of those moments where I'm kind of questioning a lot of things. I didn't feel great about just going out in general. And then I was a little nervous too. I was just a little nervous within the whole day. And I see these 3 people in there, and I hear them just ask this question like, "Oh my gosh, how do I look?" And they're all like fixing their face and fixing their like looking in the camera. And in that moment, I felt what I realized was no one is thinking about me. And
Yeah, that's a.
and
It's all just inner disturbance.
yeah, you realize the party's like, well, that kind of sucks. Like, you know, it's like, I wish they'd be like, you know, it's like, because you kind of just walk
You're
in.
not nearly as important as you
Yeah,
think.
and then you're just like,
And
and then I'm starting to like, it's this ease that slips off my shoulder that I realize like no one's really thinking about me throughout the day. Like, no one's like those people in there. They're all so caught up with, do I look right? They're all so worried that even if they were in love with me, even if one of these people were in love with me, they could not think about me as much as I think about me. There's no way, even if you get as close as possible, and that's where you just realize that like, no one will ever be thinking about you as much as you think about yourself. Like,
I think that's a huge.
and that's so
realization.
liberating, bro. And I felt it, and I was like, oh, it's just
You feel
okay.
the
Like,
energy.
no one's really thinking about me. No one's really judging me. And even if they are, so it's like the Stoics say, I can't control it. And it's just miserable to spend your whole life trying to control what people think. But, you know, you fall in and out of that, because you also want people to think good of you, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you want to put something out there that you don't want to just be like, well, I don't care what these people think about me, because of course you care. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you want people to think good of you, and I think that's just something I realized that like, it's okay to want people to think good of you, but like, you have to realize that however them thinking about you it's just never as important as you
Right.
think, and it's never gonna solve your day. It's never gonna, you know, even the good thoughts that people like have about you, like they're good, but they're not everything, you know. And people thinking about you is not everything. But when you worry and you're in that intense state of anxiety and awkwardness, like you can feel like your whole world is literally consumed by what this person could think about me.
Yeah.
It goes from literally, bro, like this huge wide span of knowing that I'm a human and that I have all these friends, to one moment that one day I don't get enough sleep and I haven't ate well, and then I get really nervous and I start closing, and this one person in the room can be like, I can be like, oh my God, whisper, and just literally feels like I'm in a time zone. And then you break out of that and you're like, wow, what the fuck was that? Like, really, what was that? That's so weird, you know?
Yeah, those are.
But it just happens to you. Like, it's such a... Mark
really-
Manson said this quote, man, on this one of his articles. He said, like, the universe did this wonderful thing of saying, here, humans, you can exist. And then the bad part is like, hey, now you got to figure it out.
Right,
Like,
right.
You know, and that seems like hell sometimes.
Yes.
So,
Yes. If you get caught up in your head like
yeah,
that.
definitely.
I think where your focus lies is really important, and I think that's when you start to shift your focus from what the things you enjoy, and we talk about having the right mindedness and focusing on how you should be, and instead you're focusing on how other people are viewing you. And I think Marcus Aurelius talks about that a lot, and it's like this idea of only focus on what you are doing. What other people are doing and how they're living their lives shouldn't really matter to you, because if everyone just focuses on how they're supposed to live, then that's really all we need to do, because I'm me. I'm not Don. I don't know how Don should live. I don't know what things he should be doing. So
What he went through, why he's being the way he's being. Like,
and I shouldn't try to be the way he is. I should not.
Yeah.
I mean, you should look up to people, and there's amazing aspects about Don that I wish to, hopefully take in one day. But I'm my own person, and you're your own person. And,
Right.
Being your own way, I think, is really...
Yeah, otherwise you're going to live a disturbed life all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
All the time. You're getting away from that disturbance or disorder in your mind.
Yeah.
That state that you described so well psychologically, where the hell was I? What the hell was happening?
Yeah.
That becomes an everyday thing if you allow that.
Especially if you don't like check it, like it.
Yeah.
And it's just so wild to me. It's just like, wow, like, in a moment, if you doubt just hard enough, you can almost feel unattached from your beliefs and how much good work you've done in the past. It can all look futile in you in that moment of intense worry, anxiety. Like, even the belief to overcome it disappears. And you just kind of become that way that you feel. Evan, how much time we got left? Because I have this one last question that
It's
kind of want to start.
an hour and a half, so I say we just wrap it up with this way.
So, Don, this is the last question that
Okay.
I feel like I want to start this tradition of asking each guest this last question, and kind of to leave them off with something.
Wait, before you start with that question, can I read this quote that really applies? And
Go ahead.
I just found it.
No,
and
go
I think it's really good. Exactly what we just talked about. He says, "Nothing that goes on in anyone else's mind can harm you, nor can the shifts and changes in the world around you. Then where is the harm to be found? In your capacity to see it. Stop doing that, and then everything will be fine."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's so funny, the harmful thing, because I was thinking the other day, like, even if someone is thinking bad about you, like, what are they going to do? Come beat you up?
Right.
Probably not.
No.
You have nothing to worry about. Like, it's
Yeah.
really okay, because there's, like, people all over this planet who don't even know you. Like, and you really need to work on, like, understanding that every day. But anyway.
So you were harming yourself there. It wasn't anybody else.
No one. And then I'm
Yeah.
just like,
Put yourself into that state.
Yeah. But, Don, I guess what I was going to ask you, what do you feel like is the most impactful or best piece of advice that you've heard in your whole life, from whether it was in philosophy or anything? What has been that
Wow.
maybe gave you that sense of belongingness, I guess, that everything's going to be okay? The most impactful advice that you've probably felt the deepest?
Well, that's a great question.
Take your time, don't feel that.
Shoot. I had an answer to that question the other day. It's interesting. I've somehow forgotten it.
The most impactful.
I forgot
Please.
it. Yeah, it's funny. Aristotle says you can forget intellectual knowledge, but you don't forget virtue. But anyway,
Makes sense.
I think here it is. Yeah, this is what I came to. I remembered it.
That's
That's
like
See,
It's
we
just
had to be
that's a 19% chance.
we had to be capable of
I like
accepting the
never remember things that I
uncomfortable.
forget in 5 minutes. It takes like an hour, and then I'm like, oh, okay.
But I really do think there's an Indian sage, Ramana Maharshi, who I think asks the philosophical question, and I think the philosophical question, and Ramana Maharshi keeps saying this, that you should ask this to yourself every day, is, who am I? And when you ask that question, then you have to follow it up with, well, who is asking, who am I? And then you have to keep asking in that way, who am I, so that you can find it and live it. But that who am I, and continuing to ask that question, that's something I often have to write down, because I get in the midst of doing my classes and doing all this other stuff and reading philosophy, and I forget to ask myself that question. If I can just remind myself of that question, then maybe I can also remember some good answers to that question and try to live according to them. So I think that particular advice, to keep asking yourself, who am I? And I think the Stoics did that all the time also. Who am I? That is has had the greatest impact on my life, and even the greatest potential impact if I can just keep doing it. So
Because I think the answer always changes, and it's something that you can continually, and you should continually ask yourself, because like you said, you might think you have an answer at first glance, but then you ask yourself again and you dig a little deeper and you're like, okay, no, maybe I don't really fully understand. And you think, okay, who am I? Okay, well, I'm Evan Holmes. It's like, no, that's your name. That's
Right.
not who you are.
right.
Okay, who am I? Well, I go to college. No, that's something you do. And again, with sports or whatever it is, like, these are not who you are. It's things that you do. And so separating out who am I deep down, and then that also brings back up the question, who do I want to be? And then how should I act? And then it stems and branches into many different things that ground you in where you need to be again.
Right.
And I think that's just an amazing answer.
So good.
Yeah.
Good.
And you
That
see
was a
that-
good explanation.
And
too.
you see that, well, because I've seen that same question. I've been diving into spirituality, and even what like Zen masters and those types of beings teaches. That's the one thing they say is ask yourself continue to ask, who am I?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a beautiful answer.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Don, I just want to say, and to y'all, thank you, everybody, especially if you made it this far.
Yeah. If you made it this far, you're a real one.
You're
I'll
true
buy you
Really
something.
incredible.
They're
I'll
true
buy you a
stoic.
book. Or,
Like,
something
please
like
text
that.
me, like, donuts on me, anything you want.
Yeah. Text me some donut emojis if you made it this far.
Yeah, please. And Don, I just want to say thank you for taking your time out here today to come talk to us, and we do really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
This
This
is
is
a blessing.
a rare opportunity. I think you guys I call you true students and serious students, and I appreciate that. That's what I want to do, is talk to people who are very interested in the same sorts of things that I'm interested in.
That's
You know,
what this
so-
podcast is
Oh,
about.
dude, yeah. And at nighttime we're
Just something
bad.
like-
We can't go to sleep. We're just sitting up in bed.
Just
looking
talking
at-
about stuff.
And then Evan's like, dude, go to bed. I'm like, bro, but think about it. Think about what I just said.
Yeah.
Freak shit. Thank you, Don.
Yes.
You're welcome.
It was a
Thank you,
pleasure.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Very happy. We had a great time.
All right,
Oh,
y'all.
yeah.
This is the
Excited
book
for our class.
we were talking about.
Oh, here, don't forget your hat.
Oh, thank you.
That's a pretty cool hat, too.
Yeah.
It's got some styles. It's probably not focused. It's close up, but...
Don?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, Harry, you can say bye to the camera if you want to.
It's not focused close up, but you can.
Bye-bye.
See you, Don.
All right, Don. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Yep.
enjoyed it.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Don.
Dude, it just died.
Wow.
Is that not perfect timing?
Yeah.
Wait, why did we just like tell him to leave that? I should have talked to him a little more.
Yeah.
It's alright.
Yeah, I'm gonna go eat real quick.